Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered, your go-to source for industry insights and wealth creation. Stay ahead of the curve with a thorough breakdown of market trends, financial developments, and the impact of current events on your wealth building strategy. We deliver the latest updates and essential insights into the financial world through expert interviews and detailed analysis. Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered. This episode, we are so excited. We're bringing you Scaling with Intention. This is the power of the EOS system. So my name is Samantha. I am the host of Wealth Unfiltered, and I'm here with my resident guest, Chris Parinello. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm very excited because today we'll also be having our first special guest. We have Brian Underhill, who is the implementer for Viking Capital. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump in, and to get started, I'd like us to go ahead and define what the EOS system is. So Chris, can you give us a little bit of insight, please?
Yeah, EOS is the acronym stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's really a framework for small, mid, even large companies to stay organized, set their goals, and more importantly, create accountability and results throughout the organization.
Thank you so much. So what really happened this last week that we had that you and I felt was so powerful that we wanted to actually bring this to the podcast platform was that we had our annual EOS meeting. And I think one of the things that we talked about after the meeting was the impact it really provided for us moving forward. So to kind of give a quick lens into what we do is every single quarter we have an EOS, and the leaders in the company, any director level or above, they sit down together and really they go over all of the nuances from metrics, KPIs to goals, how to achieve those goals. And we'll break down everything a bit more later in the episode, but those are quarterly. The annual, which we just finished, was two separate leadership groups all together in one space. And we broke down into the junior leadership and the director leadership. And that was super exciting because I think it really put us all in alignment to continue our growth for not only 1 year, but for the next 3 years. So I'm very excited about this episode.
Yeah, and I think, you'll find out from Brian that I think that isn't typical of EOS, having the juniors and the leadership. That was a riff on EOS. And I think after fighting it and then reluctantly giving in, he's actually quite happy with the alignment that it brought throughout the company. So I'm hoping that that's something that can be more permanent.
Absolutely. And someone who I pride every entrepreneurial company who has the operations, this truly calculated as far as how they move forward. It makes my heart happy. It makes my heart sing a little bit. So I really enjoyed it. And this was my very first one with Viking. So this was a really impactful, 3 days for me as well. So what I want to do is I want to discuss, I guess maybe let's talk first about something that isn't EOS quickly. I want to formally introduce Christopher as the VP of Investor Relations. He was just promoted from director, so congratulations. And I wanted to make sure moving forward that I address you as the VP. So I just wanted to let you know I'm so proud of you. And that was such the highlight of our EOS too, because that was unexpected.
Yeah, it was very unexpected. And they did make it quite special, announcing it at our annual in front of the entire team, and very grateful. Really love what I do. So getting recognized is always nice.
Absolutely. And you deserve it. It was much deserved. And it was really a shock to everyone in the room. Everyone kept asking me, so did you know? And I said, no way. I did not know. I was just as shocked as everybody else. And it was really exciting. So that was wonderful. But it's also part of hitting those goals and achieving everything. And so last year you all did the annual as well. And, I think probably you surpassed a lot of the goals and for your department. And I think they saw how much you brought to the table and how you and your team have really continued your growth. And so I think we can attribute a lot of that to the EOS last year.
Well, and I think that's just one of the special things about EOS is you're documenting everything along you go, your wins, your losses, what went well, what didn't go well. So when you keep track of things like that, it's really easy to track your progress, personal, team, company wide.
Right. So, this episode, we wanted to talk about scaling with intention. And I think that's really important because I don't know any business who wouldn't want to scale, who doesn't want to grow, who doesn't, have that at the forefront, especially at the beginning of every year. You set aside your goals and you say, how are we going to get there? Um, but I think specifically the word intention is really important when it comes to EOS because it is very much deliberate and it is broken down into so many different pieces. So just to like quickly go over what those look like, I know Brian really will dive a lot further in for us, but for me, understanding that it's the vision, right? It's the people, the data, it's the issues, the process, and then traction. And that is really
That's
the
it.
fundamentals, right? So from your own words, as being somebody who's gone through this now 3 times, and this is like part of like what you all do, and you were specifically with Brian as your implementer, maybe talk a little bit about how all of that took place and kind of the format.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and to give some context, we've only worked with Brian. This is our second quarter working with him. He's a new implementer for us. Fantastic. Um,
Right. Previously,
Prior to that, we worked with another EOS implementer, and Vikings had it predated me. I came into Viking with the EOS format, but we were using another implementer. His name was Steve Prada, also fantastic. But he had moved away from traditional EOS and had created his own brand called Pinnacle. Same concept, except it was kind of his spin on it. He changed things to suit what he thought his clients needed. Um, what I always thought was really powerful is the whole concept of EOS really starts from the top down. And that's one of the reasons why Brian pushed so hard for it to be leaders only and not the entire team. And the idea is that at the very top, you have a visionary. And this is the person, think like an Elon Musk, like
yes,
someone who is just like literally a rocket taking off into outer space.
wants to get to Mars.
And they don't really care how we're going to get there, but their goals are so big and their dreams are so big. And what they are great at is isolating the vision and pushing the company forward. So basically, the visionary is, the rocket fuel of the company. They're pushing you forward, they're propelling you forward. And what they say is that every single company to be successful needs to have that vision. But you need harmony. You can't just have vision. You can't have someone that has huge ideas and not know how to intelligently scale. So, what is integral to the visionary being able to find success is having a solid integrator. So even the smallest entrepreneurial company needs to have somebody that has the big ideas and has somebody that's going to integrate and figure out how to achieve those dreams. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to Viking is for any of you that have met Vikram Raya, he is the epitome of a visionary, and then Ravi Gupta is you know careful and collected and calm and doesn't get crazy overwhelmed, and he's the steady piece that brings harmony to Vikram's crazy wild dreams and ambition.
Absolutely.
And that is ultimately the framework for EOS at its highest level. And then as you continue to go down from the visionary and integrator, you have more flexibility. So you don't have to have a set amount of divisions. You have the next layer of the company. In our case, it's directors and VPs. Um, and the way that the leadership council is essentially set up is you have the people that head each vertical that need to be in these quarterly EOS meetings. And um, and we all have a say in how we're going to grow and intentionally scale. And that's, I think, the other really powerful part, which I don't know if we're going to get into, kind of the trust exercise or any of
I
that.
think actually it's a really great segue because one of the things that I was going to mention is it says people. And that's twofold, right? So one of the pieces is that right people in the right places in the right seats. Okay. So that's one fundamental piece of the people. The other one is ensuring that they're bought in, that they see the vision, they see how the plan is to achieve it and how you get there. So that comes the trust. So I would say if you could touch a little bit on both of those and what, you know, specifically now that we do have a new implementer, Brian, how that maybe has shifted and kind of what happened in this last EOS.
Yeah, I think, one of the really powerful moments in this particular EOS, and I've been doing this for 2 years and had never done this exercise, was understanding the pyramid that kind of correlates to EOS and what you need in order to get the results that you're looking for. So you essentially have this activity where there's a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid is the word trust. Up one level is conflict. Up one level is commitment. Up one level is accountability, and then is results. And the idea is, and the way that they're defined is, um, trust is basically broken down into just knowing that you have a voice. Even if what you're saying isn't popular, you're a leader in this company and you're able to say what you think. And not everyone might agree with you. People might override you. It's not a democracy. But you get to say what you think.
And that's pretty impactful because a lot of people don't feel they're in the businesses or companies they run with, especially in leadership roles where there's
Yeah.
multiple, that they have a voice.
Well, and it's not just what we're going to do next or how we should do something. It's also, is somebody carrying their weight? Or like, and that leads you to the next rung in the pyramid, which is conflict. And the argument is that if you truly have trust and people don't feel like they're going to be fired for saying what's on their mind, and that everyone's being honest and truthful for the betterment of the company, then it's inevitably going to lead to conflict and healthy conflict. And you're going to have those big ideas, you're going to have those big discussions, and that leads you to the next rung, which is commitment. And the idea is that if you have commitment doesn't mean that you're willing to do whatever the company, you know, says you have to do that day or whatever your boss says you're going to do. Commitment is that if you have trust and if you have conflict and you get your voices heard, that's what the company owes you, is to be heard. If the brain trust or the leaders of the company decide to go a different direction, but you were heard, then you row in the same direction with everybody else. You know that you were given what was owed to you. And that's your commitment to the company, that you're not going to be the thing that holds the company back, even if you think it should be done a different way, and you're not going to harbor that resentment. And that is what takes you to accountability.
I will say that piece is probably, I would imagine, the hardest piece out of the pyramid, right? Because it probably makes it very difficult if you feel, I told you how I feel about this and I stood strong and it caused us to have conflict and the resolution still isn't the thing that I think it is. Like
Yeah.
that's
And we
disheartening to
even
some
asked,
people.
we
So
even
that's
asked
tough.
Brian about this because we got and we are like, okay, you have trust, you have conflict. Those are you. Trust is the most important one, but you're like, okay, I've gotten to the commitment, but like now I've gotten to commitment. The majority of the company agrees on what we should do, or the leadership has decided what we're going to do. But a couple of people, like, they say that they're not harboring resentment, but they're clearly harboring resentment. They're kind of dragging their feet. They're not swimming in the same direction.
Right.
It feels like they're holding everybody back. What EOS would tell you is that they probably aren't the right fit for the company.
So it goes back to right person in the right seat.
It goes back to right person in the right seat.
Yeah. I love
And
that because I think it's pretty clearly defined.
because if you're in a raft and half the boat's rowing one way, half the boat's rowing the other way, you're just going in circles.
True. Or you're
Yeah.
the anchor weighing it all down.
Right. So like the idea is that you have to, if you trust the process and you use the tools that are built within the EOS framework, it will help you get the right people in the right seat. And you will notice that when you do have true trust and you do have true commitment, that it leads to accountability.
Right.
Or conflict, commitment, and it leads to accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that that's the second to the last one is if people feel like they can actually, everyone in the company is being held accountable, everyone's rowing in the same direction, and people are moving the company forward, that is your result. That's the top of the pyramid.
Because accountability equals your KPIs, your metrics, your ability to be measured, and actually how much are you actually doing. And I
Right.
think, and which brings us then to results. But that piece I think is also pretty vital in the pyramid because once you say, yeah, I'm bought in, yes, you have all of that, you have the commitment. But if the results aren't there, if you're not actually hitting your KPIs and the results are also not there, then that's another
It
indicator.
usually means that somebody isn't bought in and doesn't have
Something's
the
broken.
commitment, or people are doing things or saying they're doing things, but there isn't an accountability structure. And that's
Right.
what one of the things that EOS does with their scorecards and their KPIs and the weekly tracking and the rocks and all of the system really creates a fail-proof way that if you follow the system and you actually buy in and you meet weekly and you meet quarterly and you go through this process, it's really hard to not at least fail forward
Right.
or fail
And
up.
right. So that's a really good point when you say quarterly, monthly, weekly, because not only do we have these big meetings that happen every quarter and annually, every single week we have the same accountability because like you were talking about, we have what they call an L10 meeting. And as directors, you all have one meeting with all of you together where you continue to track all of the same information that you did, that you put together at the very beginning of the year and or quarter for all of those key metrics. Those also then from that meeting trickle down to each and every department in which we each have our own. So marketing, IR, acquisitions. Now we'll have operations and finance. Um, who I'm missing one. I'm sorry. What am I missing?
Asset
Acquisitions,
management,
asset
acquisitions.
management. That's the one. I'm like, they're an important piece. What am I missing? So each and every one of us have our own L10 meeting. And then that trickles down to the very literal every single member on every team. So it's not that there's any person that is part of Viking who isn't part of one of these meetings, who doesn't see the path forward, who doesn't see the goal set from the absolute top down. So I
Right.
think it's a really, really important piece that it's not just a quarterly annual meeting. I mean, this thing happens every week to keep us all on the same page.
Yeah, and then the way that they kinda go about it is you really set kind of you'll look at your current year state, and then you're almost like building a dream state. So it's like, "Okay, well, what are we gonna do in 3 years? And then what are we gonna do in, like, 5 or 10 years?" And you kinda work your way back. You're like, "Okay, if I'm gonna do this in 3 years, what are the things that I'm gonna accomplish in 1 year?" And then, like, before you know it, you're in this annual retreat, and you've gotten through day 1 where you're, like, very 100,000 feet view and you've built the trust and everyone, has gone through the exercises to feel like we all have like a pretty good idea of what we want to do. We've talked about all the different divisions and then we start going into the numbers review and talking about what we can do to propel the company forward division by division and it becomes really powerful. But at the end of the 2-day summit, you have clearly outlined 3-year goals, a 1-year plan to get you one third of the way there. You haven't spent a lot of time on year 2, but you look at what you're gonna accomplish in year 3, and, like, the part of the exercise that I really liked was, um, Brian basically on the 3 and 1-year goals, he goes around the room, and before we can move on, he's like, "Okay, if we achieve this, and we achieve this, and we achieve this, and you achieve your 3-year goals, will you be fulfilled? Will this be, like, the best quarter that you've ever had?" And everyone has to buy in. And that's the thing is like it's not you're not trying to come up with what's reasonable that you can do. Like the visionary of the group is pushing you and you're trying to come up with something and the piece that I didn't know until working with Brian was that you're never hit your 3-year goal ever. You're never supposed to hit your 3-year goal. So when we
Interesting.
get 2 years out and we do our annual again, our 3-year goal is going to be some other attainable thing. You're constantly having the goalpost moved on you every single year because what you now know what you don't know.
Right,
So
exactly.
like you're in year 2 of this plan, year 3 moving forward is going to be even more powerful than what your year 3 was the previous year.
Which is
Um,
why we're talking about scalability, because it's very exciting and how the EOS system gets you there. So, the foundation of the pyramid is trust. But in order for us to create that trust and build on the foundation, Brian had you guys do an exercise. So, what I would really like is for you to explain about how that came about and maybe the most impactful part.
yeah, so there were 2 parts. The first part was that you had like a list of 6 questions and they were kind of like get to know you type questions. So this was like the easy part of the exercise.
The icebreakers.
Kind of like an icebreaker. So it
Right.
was like, where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? What was an adversity you faced as a child? Um, what was your worst job? What was your best job? And what's your unique? What's the thing that no one knows about you that makes you special?
Okay, cool.
And you go around the room. So there was, 8 people in our leadership team, including the owners of the company. And we get around and everyone gives their feedback. or it gives their answers. And then we get to the next part of the exercise, which is the harder part of the exercise. And everyone has to basically look to the person to their left, and they have to say, um, start with their person to the left. So you don't get out of just one person. Each person around the entire circle, you have to look directly into their eyes. You need to say one thing that you admire about them. And then you go around the entire room, and each person does this. This took like an hour and a half to get through everybody. So you go through the
And that's a
entire
small team.
small team. You go through everything, what you admire about that person, which feels really great to hear 8 or 9 people telling you how great you are.
Right.
And then when it gets back to you and everyone's completed that, you have to take out a pen and paper and take notes on what people say about you. You have to go around the room and you need to look into their eyes and you need to tell them one thing that they either need to start or stop doing because they're hurting the company
Or,
or themselves,
okay.
themselves or the company. And
Let's talk about a few of the ones they gave you.
I mean, I felt like everyone went pretty soft on me. Like mine were like one of them was do more podcasts. We're doing not enough podcasts, and they really listened to it and they liked it. So I should do more. Another one I got was sometime I need to start being more vocal now as a VP in the company. When I see something, if I think it could be done better or I think I can help somebody, to actually step in and give that feedback and not just sit on it and let it fester and then mention it to somebody else and then be like, oh, by the way, like you could have done this differently. It's like, things like that.
Right.
That all seemed like they wanted me to be more involved and take on a bigger leadership role. Kind of
Was there
revolved.
any that were given that were really common amongst the group?
No, everyone had
Really?
unique things. Like some people, it was like having confidence or second guessing themselves, or
Trusting your gut.
sometimes it's the opposite. It's like you're too confident, you know.
Yeah.
Um, they were really useful, and I think the idea behind this exercise, similar to the diagram with the pyramid, it was a quadrant, and you essentially have 4 tiles in a quadrant, and the top tile that's here is like what you can see and what others can see. And then it's like what others can see, but you can't see. And the idea is that the very last box is like impossible. It's what you can't see and what others can't see. But the idea is that by doing this trust exercise and really building your muscle of being able to address what others see and also being able to notice what other people don't see and help them get towards, is this box and this box move towards the first box. And if you get everyone operating in that one box, then everyone's operating with the things that they can see and what others can see. And everyone's working harder and
I'm
addressing
not
their
gonna
blind
lie, there's a
spots.
lot of boxes and seeing. But what I'm gathering from all of this is that there are basically the point of this is that there's blind spots for everybody, and that in those blind spots, if if you trust each other enough to bring them up, then you can learn to get rid of those blind spots, or at least be honest enough to have somebody have your back all the time enough until you can grow that muscle so
Yeah,
that that blind spot goes away. Am I right?
correct.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think without seeing the visual, not being in the space, it was a little bit harder for me to really understand what you meant. But as long as I got it and our listeners get it, that's really what's important here.
That's it.
Okay, amazing. Okay, great. That makes me really excited. I love that. So, I would say one of the other pieces for EOS is we started talking about the weekly meetings. So, how do you feel do you feel like the weekly meetings are impactful? Do you think the leadership one is the most impactful? Do you think your individual one? I could tell you my perspective from being, the second in command in my department, but I'd really like to understand what you feel like has the most impact for the continued development and scalability of Viking.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the leadership L10 is more of the model L10, and it usually runs a little bit smoother because it's more high level. So there are the way that these things are broken up, just for the audience, is you essentially have like you start the meeting with wins, You have like a professional win and a personal win. You go into your KPIs, and each person on the leadership team will talk about their unique KPIs, whether they hit them or they didn't. And then you'll go into rocks, which are any to dos that are going to take more than a week to complete, that are impactful for the company. They're going to move the company forward. Each person usually has one or two rocks.
And those are supposed to be finished in the quarter
And
mostly.
right, there are long-standing to-dos that will take roughly a quarter to finish, or you're ambitiously trying to get them done in a quarter.
Right.
And then once you get through your rocks, those usually customer employee headlines where you talk about people on PTO or if somebody's doing really well. And
Shout
then
outs. Yeah.
shout outs, and then you go through all of the previous week's to-dos. So one of the the things that will make or break your EOS journey is when you're going through your weekly L10 and you're talking about all these things, especially in the next section, IDS, where you identify, discuss, and solve. You should have 20, 30, 40, 50 to-dos come out of these actionable items that you're going to take to address the issues that you have in IDS.
Right. And that could be anything from meetings to deliverables to scheduling things. I
Right.
mean, there's all sorts of
And then whoever's running
IDS
your meeting when you complete the
topics.
meeting will take a screenshot of all the to-dos and post it in our leadership Slack channel. So throughout the week, if you don't remember what you're supposed to be doing, most people, can, remember, but if you don't, or you want to make sure that you're not missing something, you go back to that to-do list and you make sure that you have all of those checked off. You get all of your to-dos done, then you have multiple rocks that are things that you could be doing that are impactful if you have extra time. And then to your point, where I think there's more energy being created is in your unique verticals L10. So when I go to the leadership L10, a lot of what I'm doing is reporting what my team has done
Right.
and talking about an issue if there is an issue. But a lot of times, if you're doing a powerful departmental L10, you don't have many issues. And
Well, and let me just quickly relate this back to real estate. So, for us, obviously we're a real estate private equity firm, right? So that is our focus in every one of these meetings, which typically, specifically for you, but also ours in marketing has that a bit. Pretty much like half and half is deal related, right? So when we
Mhm.
have a new deal or multiple deals, that's when those issues can arise because if there is something going on in our department that the entire company needed to be privy to because maybe there was an issue like with us for instance in marketing if we weren't given the right numbers or we need numbers from a department but we haven't been able to receive those yet in order for us to put out our marketing assets we need to get those from other parts of the company, right?
Right.
So if I need those numbers, you need those numbers, so we need to get those numbers from either asset management or acquisition. So it's really a universal platform for everyone to communicate.
Right. And I think that was why the idea of having a juniors L10 made a ton of sense. Because right now, the way it works is we will have a meeting in investor relations and we'll be missing something. And there will be a to do for one of the people on my team to reach out to the asset management team to get the information and then have to schedule a meeting to discuss the information and get everything organized. If you guys are having your weekly L10 meeting too, as the junior group or the number twos in the divisions, then you can take the to dos and later on in the week meet with everybody and assimilate that data and get everything together tighter and more efficiently.
Absolutely. I would say that to me, that was the most powerful thing that came from EOS on this annual was that by us going and having the number twos present, and we had a couple other people as well, but having us present and then allowing us to say how collaborative it was and how much that really, I think, helped us all have alignment for the future because we also did all of the same things that the directors did in our own meeting, coming together and putting together our 3-year and 1-year goals and then how to achieve them and really, diving in deep. But we realized that collaboration was so impactful that coming from this EOS meeting that we've never had a junior L10 before. So we said starting in January, we're going to
Yeah.
start that meeting. And I think having the ability to solve the problems in the room and to really address everything and not have to wait and hear back. Because I mean, your meeting is on a Monday, but then the marketing meeting is on a Wednesday, your investor relations on Thursday. That's 4 days where unless you're directly just slacking everybody, emailing everybody, the the instant communication isn't there. So having ours the next day, we're able to really continue that growth and get everyone fully aligned more quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's I think it's important for every entrepreneurial company to have this kind of system because this is the first company I've worked for that utilized EOS. And I've worked for really successful companies that always had some kind of disorganization because it would be like, oh, this guy had a really good idea. And we talked about doing this for like the last 2 years and we never did it.
Right.
And we'd get like the top 60% of things done that the company needed to get on a weekly or monthly or annual basis. Yeah, so on an annual basis, I think the biggest gripe I hear from past companies I've worked with or other companies of that I know folks that work at is we had all of these really great ideas when we met, and then 6 months went by and we didn't nothing was actionable. We didn't actually achieve any of those things.
Right. Because there wasn't the implementation, there wasn't the accountability, it wasn't even the documenting of the
Right.
process. So yeah,
It's
that
like, oh,
makes a
I
lot
had
of
a really
sense.
good idea.
Yeah.
And you know,
So we kind of touched on, the collaboration piece and why that was so important. So what I wanted to ask you is one of the core pieces of EOS is creating strong leaders, right?
mhm.
And especially for a company. So I would say how do you feel like EOS helps with collaboration and then creating those leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives you a seat at the table. So you feel like you're heard. You feel like you're making an impact because especially if you're in part of the planning process in the annual or what ends up happening after the annual is there's one time during your annual or your actual year where you can reframe the expectations you set in your annual and that's in the end of Q1. You meet again and you basically look back on your annual and say, okay, we've had one quarter, what needs to be adjusted? If you're a part of those two meetings, then you feel really engaged and you know what you're working towards. Um, I think that not being in that leadership meeting, it really takes a leader being at that meeting, coming back to their own vertical and instilling what they felt to the rest of their team. And if you like I feel like if you're working on a team where the leader doesn't buy in to EOS and kind of haphazardly does his L10 or somebody comes in is like very structured and sets rocks for his team and is pushing them, it creates the opportunity to really build strong mentorship. Um, top down to you and then for you to push it down to the people that are underneath you and create a growth plan for them and let them know that they're not wondering how do they fit in this new company vision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's crucial. My last question about EOS for you is I so there is the company's values, there's the company's goals, and there's priorities for every company. My question is how does the EOS system like push you to get to those and like pull out those priorities so that you can accomplish them?
Right. Well, that's something that you do. Like, so if you decided that you were going to implement EOS and you hired an EOS implementer, the very first thing that they would do is help you set all that up. That is like foundational. What are your core values? What is your mission statement? What is your like when we were working with Steve, we spent a lot of time figuring out what our blue ocean strategy was. Like, what was it that made us unique? And you need to have all of that kind of put into place when you get this started out, and you'll also develop what your org chart looks like, and you'll every time you meet every quarter you'll kind of revisit what that org chart looks like and you'll figure out, okay, if you're trying to get here, how does your team need to grow? Like what does intelligent growth look like? um so I think it lends to the ability to really plan and strategize ahead of time, and you feel like you're being much more proactive than you are being reactive.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting take too is I think maybe we haven't touched on that piece enough is that there is, kind of a step-by-step process, but there's like the first steps isn't how where are we going in a year and 3 years from now if you haven't
No.
had the foundation set for you, if you're just going to start implementing EOS and this is something that, listening to us is like, wow, this is super empowering and I feel like I want my business to scale and I think that what they're talking about could be super beneficial, then there's steps to that, right? So you would find an implementer. or a company to do it. I've seen a lot. I did a lot of research
I
and
would argue that the very first step,
uh-huh.
I don't mean to interrupt, but the
No.
very first step is to pick up and read Traction and get a grip. And
Okay.
one
I
book is
agree.
based off of kind of explaining to you the basics. Another one is more of like a fictional story that follows a character in his own company
Right.
that implements EOS, and you see how
Pretty
powerful the journey
inspirational.
is. Such a cool way to write a book.
Yeah.
I read both of those books. Viking bought them for me before I started at Viking. And when I got to Viking, I was so excited to see it in action. I was like, wow, this is quite amazing.
So maybe also, obviously, pick up the books and read them. We're not sponsored by them. We're not pushing it, but it is something that it will give you a lot of information. And then take action, right? That's like what the whole point is take action. So find an implementer. I did a lot of research when I was actually writing a blog similar to this. And one of the things that I saw was that people were asking a lot of questions about like, do you need an implementer? Do you need this? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, you don't have to have one. It's expensive. It's an investment in your company. And that's how you have to look at it. But I would say that in order for you, especially in the beginning, to really scale, to really grow, to get yourself to that point, you need somebody who's going to ask the hard questions, who are going to kind of make you uncomfortable and
For
and
sure.
challenge you. And normally you're not going to do that if anyone knows you. If you're just in the company, that's a very hard position to be put in. And I think having an outside perspective, somebody who comes in and this is their role, is to challenge you, to make you a little uncomfortable, to maybe, help recognize some things. Like one instance for is like I remember when you all went to the Hermosi event for scaling. And one of the things they said was recognizing if you had the right people in the right seats. And if you don't, what do you do? Right. That
Right.
takes an outside perspective a lot of times to kind of force your hand. Like there's maybe a bunch of red flags and you don't know, oh man, like I just want to keep giving the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes it's better for someone to help you see things that you don't want to see, your blind spots.
Right. Well, and when you set it up properly, like part of that meeting when you meet quarterly is going over the goals you set, and you're going over the actual revenue, the actual financials for your company, and taking a look at net profit, revenue, what your COGS are, what your EBITDA is. You're looking at all these things and having that person holding you accountable and not letting you, because it can turn into a real feel good meeting when you're setting goals. Like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
but like having someone there saying, like, is that realistic? And like, look, this is what you did last year. Like, what are you doing to change? Like, how are you moving this forward?
hmm
Like, I would say, like, having an implementer is necessary.
Yeah. And then I think once you've decided to do that and you're ready to take action, then I would encourage you to tell all of your people, whether it's do due diligence online, read some of these books to really acclimate themselves to what the EOS is. Tell them to listen to our podcast. They can hear all
Yeah.
about it. But in all seriousness, I think it's a great way for people to get bought in is if they really understand the ins and outs of it prior to showing up. So I think that's probably a big piece as well. Earlier this week, we sat down with Brian Underhill. He is the EOS implementer for Viking Capital. He gave us an inside perspective from the implementer's point of view. Let's take a look at the clip now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered. My name is Samantha. I'm your host, and I'm here today with Brian Underhill. He is the implementer for Viking Capital for our EOS. So, welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, we have our podcast, and Chris and I really are diving into the EOS system. So for those of you who don't know, we just had our annual EOS, and Brian is our implementer. And the biggest thing for us was we decided, like, all of a sudden, this was so powerful. It was amazing for Viking. And we switched our entire schedule up so that we could have you on the show because we really felt like this was such a powerful thing for Viking. So I
Thank you.
guess from what we'd like to know from you, like we obviously have our perspective and how we view everything as the client, but what we would love to hear a couple of things. First and foremost, like how you feel the impact is for your clients and the trajectory you see for them as the implementer?
Yeah, the great question. We implemented EOS for my company years ago. I was running a process engineering, quality engineering company with my my two partners that we founded it with, and I thought when running it and bringing in an implementer, it was kind of a unique situation. I didn't realize that when I started to work with my clients, the results are similar. Just massive amount of organizational clarity. Um, One of the things that I really fell in love with as an EOS implementer, more so than when I was actually running my company, I really got a sense of appreciation for it, is a massive amount of clarity that it created within our organization. And what I mean by that is it distilled the complexities of running a business down to black and white expectations. Because EOS is all about execution. And when you could shift the mindset from managing people, right? Because you can't do that. It's impossible to manage people. It's like managing some kind of behavior for an effect. You can't do it. When you shift things over towards managing expectations, that becomes very simple, not easy, but simple. And so if you create an organization with just black and white expectations, you can manage to that, right? And that's one of the big shifts of clarity that I found so refreshing as I took the show on the road, if you will, and started implementing EOS for other organizations, that massive amount of black and white clarity. And once you have that level of expectation management, then you can wrap accountability around that and just go where you want to go as an organization. Because a lot of times we get caught up in managing behavior and managing that type of energy. So I guess I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's one of the biggest profound things that I see when working with businesses is the massive amount of clarity that it creates around expectation management.
Absolutely. No, that definitely answers my question. And how do you feel accountability helps like an organization grow?
Yeah. So it's the word accountability sometimes gets overlaid with complexity. The way I look at accountability is two prongs. And that's it. So accountability, the first prong of accountability is creating expectations because of which I just spoke about. If you can create black and white expectations, you can manage that. Is it done or not done? Is it on or off track? Is it met or not met? That's expectation management. But that's the first prong of accountability. The second prong of accountability is actually doing something that when the expectation is or is not hit. So, for instance, if you gave me the expectations with this goal in mind that I need to get done in 90 days, or this number that I need to hit in 1 week, that's expectation you can manage to me. But if I don't hit it, the second prong of accountability is how are you going to address or correct that? Get to the root of correcting that. Is it is it the fact that the expectation is unrealistic? Is it that maybe I'm on the wrong person, in the wrong seat? It's a tough conversation. Maybe I need to let go of the vine and actually get other people to do it. So it's figuring that out. So when I see people start wrapping accountability around the moving parts of the organization and doing those two things very well, right? They can put anything in front of them and get the results that they want. It's almost like is it practical? Then they can do it because they can manage the expectations. Not right away. So what I like to say with my clients that I work with is that ultimately what you create is this muscle of consistent predictability around this common vision and plan. And the more you get good at expectation management and then the root cause addressing of things that are hit or not hit, the better you are as an organization entirely of creating consistent predictability around this common vision and plan. That's what I see. Did I answer your question by rambling out in there?
Yeah. No,
Did I?
absolutely. Was for me, so I will say the thing that I found the most powerful that you've definitely helped Viking do was not only with our 1 year vision, but you also helped us execute what are those expectations for 2 and 3 years from now? And then how are we going to achieve those expectations? So one of the things that Chris and I touch on briefly that I'd really like you to maybe give more clarity on as well is there are 6 main components of EOS. And maybe you can explain to us how these things work and how those specific components help us grow and meet those execute the expectations that you're talking about.
Yeah, those six key components. I mean, Gino Wickman, when he built the system, is just absolute genius. One of the things that Gino Wickman is amazing at is just stripping out the complexity of things. And he boiled organizations down to six key components, right? The vision component of our organizations have it, the people component of our organizations have the data issues, the process, the traction. So one of the things that he says, and I love the way he says it, and I've seen him do this talk, and I think it's profound. And if you kind of sit and think about it, it's really true. the root cause, I'll kind of say it, the root cause, and I talk to my clients when I first meet them because they don't really truly get that these 6 key components are common to all businesses. But the root cause of us not getting what we want from the businesses that we're parenting stems from weaknesses that exist in these 6 key components. That's it. So the root cause of us not really truly getting what we want from our businesses, the businesses that we are running, it stems from weaknesses or stress cracks that exist in these 6 key components. And so EOS does a really good job of rooting out the complexity and getting laser focused and obsessing around those 6 key areas. And EOS does a really good job at taking a very quantitative approach at measuring how strong you are in those 6 key areas. And if you're running at 60% or 70% or 40%, we work on mastering 2 disciplines with each of the components to close that gap. And so that's it, right? If you can just really obsess around those 2 disciplines that fall within each of those components, you'll move your organization to whatever baseline you started, 30%, to stronger than 80% or greater. And it's truly about getting stronger quantitatively in those 6 key areas that then allows you to have what I call the net effect of EOS, producing consistent predictability around this compelling common vision and plan as an entire organization. So that's the nutshell of how I feel around the 6 key components. It's really just mastering those 2 disciplines because it's the weaknesses that exist amongst them is the root cause of why we're not getting what we want from the businesses that are running. Now, that's with a caveat. You have the right product, you have the right service, you're in the right market. Because if you're not, EOS can't really do much about that. It's all about execution. Did I answer your question on that?
Yeah. So as the implementer, I would say, well, I guess maybe let me backtrack a little bit. So what we do is, and I think this is every client that you have, we have our quarterly meeting, and
Yeah.
every quarter we talk about how we're going to actually achieve what we set forth in our first meeting of the year, which is the annual. And
Yeah.
then we strategically try to get there. But every meeting you're there and you basically go into the meeting and you say to us, are we on track? Are we off track? Are we meeting expectations? And what I want to know is, like, from your perspective, how do you maybe encourage and or maybe even, I don't know what the right word would be, like maybe have like a come to Jesus moment where you tell people, like, you don't have the right person in the right seat, or like,
Yeah.
how do you really evaluate the growth that you see within the company?
Oh, that's a cool question. Wow, that's a big question. Um, so let me say the question back to you to make sure I understand. So you show up, we all show up, we're leaders to that big day, that day of reckoning, if you will,
Yeah.
where everything is due, right? And that moment of where you take that pause and you celebrate around the victories and you figure out the root causes of why you didn't hit what you're going to hit, and then you take a bearing and then you reforecast, or you look out the next 90 days, you look out the next year, and you reset, and then you put your head down, you go, right? So are
Yeah.
you asking kind of are you asking how do you prepare for that day, or what specifically are you asking for in that day? Because that's a really big day, and I kind
It's
of think
pretty
I know what.
loaded. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I would say, how, when you come to the meeting and we bring you our numbers and you see our progress, but maybe
yeah.
haven't hit the benchmarks,
Oh, I
what
see.
is the next step that you would either suggest for us, or how do we then approach, like, what is your approach as the implementer to get us back on track?
Oh, okay, got it. All right, this is cool. I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, what I'm about to say.
Sure.
One of the really important things that we do or supposed to do as leaders, and we oftentimes don't do, is protecting our confidence. And if you kind of think about that heady mindset thing, what happens is we're going 100 miles an hour,
Hmm.
just creating massive value for our clients, making money for the organization, being a good steward to what we've been given, which is a business. And what happens as a result of just going 100 miles an hour as a leader, our confidence will erode. It just does over time. Our confidence in where we're going, our confidence how we're going to get there, our confidence if we got the right people on the right seat, we just kind of run astray. And there's something interesting about this 90-day stop period. And it's designed to deliberately pause and do things to protect our confidence. Because if we don't, and we go through the entire year and go 100 miles an hour, at the end of the year, our confidence erodes, and we're going to have nothing but a ball of spaghetti with a product or a service that we're trying to get our clients to love. And so that day is so sacred, and you got to lean into things that do things that protect and restore the confidence that we're building. And sometimes those things are celebrating. Sometimes those things are celebrating the victory. Sometimes those things are getting to the root cause of why we didn't do. And sometimes those things are really trying to understand if we got the right people in the right seat. But we're all of us in the organization are there as employees, and we're all making decisions for the greater good. And by doing that, and if we keep that in mind, sometimes we need to have tough conversations around the things that are not being hit if we're putting the company ahead of us. And I've been in some sessions where it's gotten very vulnerable and people have literally stepped up and resigned in the middle of session, realizing that they're not the right person in the right. I mean, tears, if you could imagine, and really that's a tough meeting, but they've protected the greater good, which was not them. It's the organization. So it's a real sacred. I sound cheesy, but it's a real sacred place, if you will. It's a privilege to be there. It's a privilege to lock yourself in the room, and it's a privilege to be given a company, if you will, to steward and take that very seriously. And you have to lean into uncomfortable conversations and be extremely vulnerable. So kind of putting the question back on you, that's a really cool question. Did that resonate or with you with regard? How so? I'm really super curious because
Yeah,
I don't talk about that much. What I just talked about. I don't really lean in to talk about that much.
well, what I would say, there's two things that I feel about it. I think one is that it really emphasizes the point of, I think that all EOS stresses, which is like for leaders to work on the organization and not work
Yeah,
it, because we all
yeah,
get in that daily grind that you're talking about where our heads are
yeah.
just so ultra focused. And then like you said, we just a lot of times it happens, especially with people who are a lot higher up. They have a lot of responsibility. We have a lot of people below us. We have these big
Hmm.
teams. And so there's a lot of pressure. And then there's also just that piece where we're constantly in the grind and we never pull our heads up and are taking the macro view. But then that other piece specifically about EOS that I found really, really powerful was building the trust and having that
Hmm.
vulnerability that you're talking about. Because I I would say, like, with Chris, one of the things that I think he found the most powerful was when you did the trust exercise, where really it was about being vulnerable first, and then like having that vulnerability, having enough trust to move into being able to tell other people both the things they loved and then they
Yeah,
also felt like were areas for growth. But then also once that foundation was built, okay, then you can move into accountability, then you can move into all the steps of the pyramid. And
yeah,
when I think for him, and I think for probably all of Viking, and I imagine all of your clients as well, not really having that. We work remote, and I imagine in today's day and age a lot of people work remote, so that
yeah,
face-to-face connection where we're there and we're having to look each other in the eyes and be vulnerable with each other, it those things wouldn't happen without someone like you. You're forcing us into something that's uncomfortable in order for us to achieve something better. And
yeah,
without an implementer, I think that a lot of people wouldn't have that confidence that you're talking about, because if it was just your boss and your boss was
yeah,
just, all right, everybody, let's get in a room and let's do this
yeah,
hard thing. You can't even do that with your boss because you wouldn't feel
yeah.
that comfortability. And I think you enforce that, and that gives everybody the ability to grow in a way that we wouldn't before.
It's really interesting thing we're talking about because it's really tough to cut your own hair, right? It's really hard, and it's especially hard to work on yourself. And what we're talking about now is how do companies get results? How do we really truly get results? It's almost business as usual. You got to have the right person in the right seat. You got to have a core value alignment. You have to have a skill set alignment. Call that get it, want it, have capacity. That goes without saying. But what you really need to have is to get results is what we're talking about. And nobody has done it better, in my opinion, than Patrick Lencioni in his masterful work around the five dysfunctions of a team. And in that, he goes right, and Lencioni goes right to the root of where do results come from. And it comes from a healthy vulnerability based trust. It comes from team health. And that's not the team health that typically I used to think, oh, do we get along? Are we having fun? Oh, that's important. But what it's truly talking about is how vulnerable are we as a group, as this particular team? How willing is someone to put their arm out there and say something? and without the fear of it getting locked off. How deep and vulnerable and real and raw are we going to get about stuff? Because that's a chain reaction, and Lencioni does it masterfully. That that leads to healthy conflict, and you have healthy conflict as a team. You have commitment. You have, because everybody's in hurt. If you have a commitment as a team, a deal is a deal. You have accountability. You have accountability. You have result. And Lencioni really displayed that well. And so when you lock yourself up, whether it's a quarterly meeting, whether it's a level 10 meeting, whether it's a team building event, whether it's a 2-day annual that I kind of push my clients through, what it's doing is it's forcing the muscle of vulnerability based health. And sometimes when we squeeze, we find that there's an outlier in the room that doesn't want to go there, right? And that's going to become the rate limiting step to us as a team and getting results. And so we got to lean in and deal with that. But more so than not, we as a leadership team, we all kind of lean in there and go there. Like the meeting that I had several weeks ago was amazing, man. It was amazing. And that you're, gosh, man, and I'm not just saying it because we're on this podcast. I wouldn't say it. You guys have such a powerful level of vulnerability based trust within the organization. And it's no doubt the reason why you get the results that you get. Quantitatively, you're just freaking strong. And I kind of rambling here, but I think that's the root of where results come from. And it's a mesh of accountability, but it goes right to the root of does your team really have a level of vulnerability based trust throughout?
Absolutely.
Powerful stuff, super powerful.
Yeah. How do you feel or do you have an opinion on this? Is how can a team, whether they are small or large, benefit from starting the EOS process? Because I bet a lot of our listeners, this is the first they're hearing of EOS, or maybe they've been introduced slightly, but they didn't really understand it prior to the conversation. So do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like is it as beneficial whether you're small or big, or do you think that there's one that's better than the other?
Yeah, it's a great. The target, if you to take the target demographic for EOS implementers like myself, we typically work 10 to 250 employees. My smallest client is 5. My
Wow.
large client is 950 employees, and I got various sizes in between. I have 32 clients right now. I wish when I started my company, myself and 2 partners, I really embarked upon the journey of running on an operating system that was proven. We cobbled together, myself and my 2 business partners, our operating system, right? The way by which we had meetings, the way by which we had a vision, the way by which we had a planning, the way by which we set goals, the way by which we ran the company, an operating system. We built it ourselves. EOS is almost like in the box. Here, it just works. It's proven to work. Don't deviate from it. It just works really well, really well. Any startup company, any small company, any organization should look into an operating system that has been proven. EOS is just one of them. There are many operating systems out there. And for a small organization, just embark upon the journey of whether or not that is a right fit for you. And then go embark upon the journey. If it's a heck yes, it is a right fit, embark upon the journey if you want to do it yourself and self-implement, or if you want to bring in somebody. Obviously you have to have the cash flow to be able to do that. But
Right.
definitely, I would recommend really any size organization that is in that demographic to embark on the journey, because these operating systems have been proven to just work really well.
Would
Did I
you
get to the root of your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's great. Would you give any advice to somebody who is maybe contemplating it or like where to start?
Yeah. Um, I can speak to EOS. There's other operating systems that I would encourage people to look at, because one size doesn't fit all. And EOS is not for the faint of heart. It's very simple. It's not easy. It also calls for you to be a better version of yourself, no matter what version of yourself you already are. But what I would do is find an EOS implementer, give them a call, and say, hey, I want a 90-minute meeting. I want a free 90-minute meeting to understand what it looks like to run our organization on EOS. And the answer will be yes. It should always be yes. I give free 90-minute meetings all the time. And when you're sitting in that 90-minute meeting with that EOS implementer, they're going to go through all of the tools that are most of the tools, if you will, that allow you to make a decision. And at the end of it, be either heck yes or heck no. And heck no is the good answer. It really is. It might not be a fit. And if it's a heck yes, then what you should do is ask the question, do I want to self-implement and crack open the book and cut my own hair? Hey, that's great. If you can do that, that's awesome. Or if you want to invest money and bring in an implementer, that's kind of the algorithm, if you will, of decision making. I would embark upon if I was in my shoes back in the day and being faced with what I know now. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, how long have you been an implementer versus someone who used the EOS system?
I started my company, my first company in 2005 and ran it until 2014, 2013, 2014, where then I did a merger with another company. So then I added more partners to the company and it came a little bit bigger. I then had 7 partners, whereas once we started, we had 3. At the 7 partner level, when we were all running the company, we then embarked upon the EOS journey, and I ran our organization as one of the partners for about 2 years, and then at around 2016, I decided to leave my company, still with equity inside of it, and just embark upon the journey of the EOS implementer because I fell in love with it. And from 2016 to today, I've been doing this. I've got about 790, almost 800 sessions over the past, almost 9 years. And I love it. I absolutely love it because I see it's the tools that really work. I just push my clients with some intuition and the tool, mastering the tools. It just works. And so that's kind of my little story.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, we've only had you now for I think it's half a year at this point, and we've shifted from another implementer, and all of our feedback is very positive. We've really
Thank you.
you, and I think that this last annual was extremely powerful, and we're really excited to see the growth that we have. And honestly, as the host of this podcast, what I would love to do is hopefully bring you back next year and we can go over like, how have we grown and what have you
That'd
seen?
be awesome. That would be so cool. That would be awesome. That would be really cool.
That would be great. Well, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I appreciate you very much. And everybody, log in, watch the show, and we appreciate you all tuning in to Wealth Unfiltered. Have a great day. So we want to say thank you to Brian for joining our show. And thank you, Chris, and congratulations on your promotion.
Thanks so much.
And we thank you all for listening again and tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.